Welcome to the Clear Gun Show. I'm your host, Dr. G, with a PhD. We're going to start the show off with some COVID winter predictions for the U.S. from both Biden and one of these doctors on CNN. Then we'll go to South African cases. Then we'll check out some New York cases and a special Queens arrest that's kind of interesting, and we'll see how that develops. From there, we're going to go to some military discharges for COVID-19 in the U.S. We'll then take a look at the problem that pharmaceutical companies are having with vaccinating migrant populations around the world. From there, we'll talk about the fentanyl deaths, and the U.S. has seen a huge explosion in fentanyl deaths, way more than COVID-19 from ages 18 to 45. We'll break that down. Finally, we'll stop by Australia and see what's considered the best Christmas gift, and then we'll see a brand new animal. So with that, let's get to it. We'll start off with Biden setting the tone for COVID this winter.
Vaccinated, 570, I don't want to read, I'm not sure I got the right number. The total number of boosters is what? 57 million boosters, 1 million a day.
Oh, whoops, not that one. I meant the more ominous one.
People. Due to the steps we've taken, Omicron has not yet spread as fast as it would have otherwise done, and that's happening in Europe. But it's here now, and it's spreading, and it's going to increase. For unvaccinated, we are looking at a winter of severe illness and death for unvaccinated. For themselves, their families, and the hospitals they'll soon overwhelm. But there's good news. If you're vaccinated, you have your booster shot, you're protected from severe illness and death, period. Number 2, booster shots work. 3, boosters are free.
There it is. For the unvaccinated, we're looking at a winter of severe illness and death. Now, that was a vague and depressing outlook for winter, and it might happen. It might be the case. Now, we'll look at data surrounding South Africa, where the Omicron variant was first discovered, and we'll see how they're doing there. But before we do any of that, let's go to CNN and let's see what the experts have to say about how we can enjoy our Christmas holidays.
Can we be getting together with our vaccinated loved ones, or do you not recommend that?
Well, Allison, I would recommend that we hang our stockings with care. I think we have to be careful. If we're all going to get together, we should all be vaccinated and preferentially boosted. We should wear our masks if we're uncertain. And another thing we can do is we could all get tested the morning of our getting together. We did that at our house over Thanksgiving because we had a member who had a very serious condition that put them at risk of very severe disease should they get infected. We were all negative. It worked out just fine.
That's a little easier said than done, Dr. Scheffner. You know, it's not that easy to get those at-home rapid tests right now, still.
You're exactly correct. It's not a panacea, but it is something some people certainly can think about. And I would certainly say if you're going to any group event indoors, whether you're vaccinated or not, please wear your mask. And yes, I join the chorus of everyone saying vaccination, vaccination, vaccination. Yeah. If you haven't gotten your first dose, bring those children in, age 5 and older. And if you haven't gotten your booster and you're eligible, run, do not walk, and get vaccinated.
Okay.
So for starters, let's look at the question. Should we be getting together with vaccinated family members over Christmas? Well, ostensibly, that's the whole point of these mandates, is to get everyone vaccinated so they can go back to normal. So there's definitely a world where this question is anti-vax, right? Because it's suggesting that maybe the vaccines don't do what the mandates and what the government officials are telling us that they do in order to get our lives back to normal. Now, I want to mention a couple of the doctor's responses. First, let's go over all these things he wants to do to meet up. It's really simple. If you want to meet up and you're okay with meeting up, meet up. If you don't want to meet up because of fear of coronavirus, then I definitely wouldn't recommend meeting up. And it's that easy. So what do I mean by that? The doctors should know. We're going to go over some letters at the end of this show about transmission and vaccination. But that one person in his family that is at severe risk of COVID, the chances of transmission from vaccination, especially with Omicron, seem to be pretty good. So that was a risk that their family took. And, you know, that's their family's decision. But that was a risk they took, and that doctor should know that. And if they did know that and they took that risk, good for them. And that's the whole point. It's basically, what risk assessment are you willing to assume? Everyone's going to have their own answer, and it can be based on different things. It could be based on vaccination. It could be based on testing strips. Whatever it is, that's your own personal decision, and that's fine. But these sort of top-down, overarching rules about whether or not we can hang out with family, I think they're ridiculous, and I don't think they're going to stop anything. Now, the second point, if you're going to any indoor gathering or event where there's going to be people there, wear a mask. Wouldn't it be great if you told us what kind of mask? I mean, as far as I know, I think the only mask that actually offers protection is the KN95s that you can get easily. There's obviously more sophisticated masks, but those cost a lot more money and are not really practical, especially for a party situation. But with almost certainty, what won't do that much good for you is a cloth mask. Now, some people might say, well, I wear the cloth mask to protect others because my spit's not going through as easily. And that may or may not be true in some cases with certain cloth masks. But if you're at a party, it's going to be assumed that you're going to be drinking something or mingling in close proximity or eating or something. You're going to be doing something where your mask is going to come off. And that point where it comes off matters because that's where things spread. So basically what I'm saying is, if you're going to be going to a party, it's a party. People do things at parties that are not in accordance with all these crazy guidelines. So you shouldn't go to a party expecting these guidelines to be fully implemented, because then it's not really a party. It's just a bunch of people standing in corners of a room, doing smoke signals to each other to communicate, which I guess wouldn't be a problem if you're going to a smoke signaling party, but I'm guessing that most parties aren't going to be that. So if you're going to go to a party, go enjoy the party. Assume the risks that come with going to a party, and that's about it. Now, for the final point, if you want to walk to get your booster or not get the booster, there's a lot of nuance to this. It's not just a blanket thing for everybody, and that's okay to have nuance and caution and wait for more data. Same thing with the 5 to 11-year-olds. We're going to read a letter towards the end where a doctor discusses the problem with the messaging for vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds, and it's valid. So this run, don't walk thing, I think that is not particularly good advice. I think people should really stick to talking with their healthcare providers and finding out what's best for them. Now let's discuss the latest in South Africa's hospitalization rate from the Omicron variant. I'm reading now from Bloomberg. Only 1.7% of identified COVID-19 cases were admitted to hospital in the second week of infections in the fourth wave, that's of Omicron, compared with 19% in the same week of the third Delta-driven wave, South African Health Minister Joe Fahala said at a press conference. That being said, there were more than 20,000 cases a day, or new cases a day, compared with 4,400 in the same week of the third wave. That's further evidence of Omicron's rapid transmissibility, which a number of other countries such as the UK are also now experiencing. Scientists have been cautioning that other nations may have a different experience to South Africa, as the country's population is young compared with developed nations. Between 70% and 80% of its citizens may also have had a prior COVID-19 infection, according to antibody surveys, meaning they could have some level of protection. Two big admissions in this block of text that I'm so glad that they said, and is getting more and more prevalent in news these days. Number one, COVID is striated. It impacts the older population significantly more than the younger population. We've known this all along. Omicron is the exact same, and that's great news for the younger population and good news for the older population. That means we know who needs to be protected and who needs to take more precautions. It's really good news, especially for developing risk assessment. Now, the other thing that they say is that they acknowledge that prior COVID-19 infection might offer some sort of immunity or some sort of protection. Now, although that point is just now starting to be discussed in media as well, it's been known for quite some time, and there have been several studies on the impact of acquired immunity from infection, and it seems to be quite robust and quite good, so I'm glad they're saying it here in this article, at least a little bit. Last point in the article, currently there are about 7,600 people with COVID-19 in South African hospitals, about 40% of the peak in the second and third waves. Excess deaths, a measure of the number of deaths against a historical average, are just below 2,000 a week, which is an eighth of their previous peak. So for now, it appears that Omicron is a much more mild version of COVID than Delta. That's great news for South Africa. Now let's see what's happening in New York City. This article was published on December 16th in NBC New York. Title is, "We've Never Seen This Before in New York City. COVID positivity rate doubles in 3 days on Omicron spread." The percentage of people in New York City testing positive for COVID-19 doubled in 3 days this week, and a top advisor to Mayor Bill de Blasio said it was an indication of the Omicron variant evading immunity in a way the virus never had before. Meanwhile, the state of New York reported a massive surge in new positive tests, 18,276 in 1 day, up more than 40% in 1 day, and the highest single day total since January 14th. So Dr. Varma tweeted two things. The first was, we've never seen this before in hashtag New York City, noting the daily positivity rate on December 9th was 3.9% and appeared to have doubled by December 12th to 7.8%. But then he also tweeted this. This is hashtag SARS-CoV-2 evading both vaccine and virus-induced immunity against infection, unlike any variant before. That's only explanation for dramatic jump in positivity. Consensus for now, but subject to change, is that immunity against severe Ds should be far better. Judging by that last line about the consensus for immunity against severe disease being far better, great news for New York. And more great news, but it's kind of hilarious that the article puts this entire thing in brackets, or in parentheses. It says, a new British study released Thursday suggested the Omicron variant could cause symptoms that might be mistaken for the common cold. That comes amid growing research indicating that Omicron causes milder illness than the Delta variant, but will sicken many more people, threatening the stability of healthcare systems. So a couple of things. If the infection is evading vaccination, not a good case for the boosters for Omicron specifically. Also not a great case if you're trying to convince an unvaccinated person to get vaccinated when they decided not to get vaccinated against the far more deadly Delta variant. As for the stability of healthcare systems, it seems to me like if Omicron is a mild cold, a lot of people are going to get it, and I don't think it's going to overwhelm the healthcare systems. That's just my opinion. We'll see what happens. Maybe they do end up getting overwhelmed, but the Omicron seems relatively good compared to Delta. Towards the end of the article, they note that across the board, the city's indicators are trending in the wrong direction. Over the last 7 days, the city is averaging 2,899 positive cases a day, which is more than 1,000 cases higher than the 28-day average. Transmission rates are going almost straight up as well, 311 per 100,000 as of Monday, more than double in the space of 2 weeks. So as New York is kind of a bellwether for lots of states in the US, we'll keep a close eye on it. Now, before leaving the city, I want to highlight a video that was spreading around on Twitter. So it's hard to verify all the facts, but it seems like this actually happened. And this is of a group of protesters going to an Applebee's to eat, and they're not vaccinated, and the police coming in and arresting them for not being vaccinated and eating at Applebee's. Here's some of that footage. Now, in my opinion, I can't really verify any of this, so it's just so recent that we don't really know. But the only thing I wanted to say is maybe they should be getting arrested for eating at an Applebee's. I like a lot of chain restaurants. Many of them are really good, but doing this kind of level of protest at an Applebee's, you could have chosen a better restaurant. That's all I'm saying. Now, in all seriousness, if this actually is the case that they are being arrested specifically for being in a restaurant and not being vaccinated, that is definitely not a good look for New York. Now, more news about vaccination issues. This comes from ABC. 103 Marines have been booted for refusing COVID vaccine as services begin discharges. 103 Marines have been discharged for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine, the Marine Corps said Thursday, as the military services have begun to discharge a pool of possibly as many as 30,000 active duty service members who still refuse to be vaccinated. This coming after multiple opportunities to do so past vaccination deadlines. While the percentage of vaccinated active duty personnel in each service is at 95% or higher, the number of unvaccinated personnel is close to 30,000. Earlier this week, the Air Force became the first to make public that it had followed through on the warning, announcing that 27 airmen had received administrative discharges. According to the latest numbers provided by the Air Force and the Navy, 7,365 airmen and 5,472 sailors are unvaccinated, either refusing the vaccine outright or awaiting the processing of requests for administrative, medical, or religious exemptions. The Marine Corps said Thursday that 95% of its active duty force of 182,500 Marines had received at least one COVID vaccine shot, the lowest percentage among the military services. The Marine Corps has approved 1,007 medical and administrative exemptions and is still processing 2,863 of the 3,144 requests made for religious exemptions. And now the final branch, the Army. So the Army said that 3,864 soldiers have refused the vaccine outright, while an additional 6,263 are awaiting the processing of their request for an exemption. The majority of service members who remain unvaccinated have sought religious exemptions, but none of the services has yet to approve an exemption on religious grounds. Unlike the other services, the Army has decided that it will not discharge soldiers who refuse to be vaccinated. Instead, they will be flagged, cannot be promoted, and will have to leave the Army when their enlistment contracts expire. Flagged soldiers who have refused to get the vaccine will have to submit to regular COVID testing, Lieutenant Colonel Terrence Kelly, an Army spokesman, told ABC News. Now, historically, military servicemen have been subject to many more vaccinations and things of this nature than other federal branches, just in general. That doesn't change any of the facts on the ground about the science of this vaccine or what we know and don't know. That is just to say that this kind of action has a precedent in the U.S. military. And so with that being said, Godspeed to our troops. I hope for the best outcome. And every day we are thankful for our troops and what they do for this country. Now, before leaving the U.S., I want to touch on one last story, and that's about fentanyl overdoses and how they become the number one cause of death among U.S. adults ages 18 to 45. Between 2020 and 2021, nearly 79,000 people between 18 and 45 years old, 37,208 in 2020, and 41,587 in 2021, died of fentanyl overdoses. Comparatively, between January 1st, 2020 and December 15th, 2021, there were more than 53,000 COVID-19 deaths among those between ages of 18 and 49, according to data from the CDC. Experts believe there's a correlation between the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and the recent increases in fentanyl overdoses. More adults between 18 and 45 died of fentanyl overdoses in 2020 than any other leading cause of death, including COVID-19, motor vehicle accidents, cancer, and suicide. Fentanyl also killed more Americans in general in 2020 than car accidents, gun violence, breast cancer, and suicide, according to analysis of the CDC data from Families Against Fentanyl. Fentanyl deaths doubled from 32,754 fatalities to 64,178 fatalities in just 2 years between April 2019 and April 2021. In the first 5 months of 2021 alone, more than 42,600 fentanyl overdose deaths were reported, which represents an increase of more than 1,000 fentanyl deaths per month compared to the same time period in 2020. Overall, drug overdose deaths are expected to surpass 100,000 in 2021, according to preliminary CDC data, representing a 28% increase between April 2020 and April 2021. Finally, just marking the extent of the issue, border authorities have seized more than 11,000 pounds of fentanyl so far in fiscal year 2021, with less than 1 month to go, dwarfing the 4,776 pounds seized in fiscal year 2020. CBP seizures of other drugs, including marijuana, cocaine, and heroin, have generally decreased since 2018. Experts recommend people who use any kind of drug to carry Narcan, which is a life-saving medicine also known as naloxone, which has the ability to reverse symptoms of an overdose and potentially save lives. Now we'll briefly touch on an article from Reuters discussing how refugees lack COVID shots because drug makers fear lawsuits. So many COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers have required that countries indemnify them for any adverse events suffered by individuals as a result of the vaccines, the United Nations says. Where governments are not in control, this is not possible. So Gavi, which operates COVAX with the World Health Organization, says that where those applying for doses, mainly NGOs, can't bear legal risks, deliveries from that stockpile can only be made if vaccine makers accept the liability. Again, the main reason is because of legal concerns. Less than 2 million doses have so far been sent from the buffer, Gavi says. About 167 million people risk being excluded from national programs, according to the United Nations data cited in the documents. Unless all the firms accept legal liability, access to vaccines for some populations will remain a challenge, the Gavi document says, adding that new crises will generate additional demand to cover displaced populations. Of COVID vaccine developers, 3 Chinese drug makers have agreed to shoulder legal risks when their shots are delivered through the buffer: Sinovac Biotech Ltd, Sinopharm Group Ltd, and Clover Biopharmaceuticals Ltd. According to that Gavi document, the drug makers did not respond to requests for comment in this article. Johnson & Johnson from the United States confirmed it would waive a requirement for indemnity for deliveries from the buffer. Quote, "We are proud to be part of this effort to protect the world's most vulnerable people," end quote, said the vice chairman of the executive committee and chief scientific officer. But less than 1/3 of COVAX supplies have come from these 4 firms. COVAX data shows that Clover's shot has not yet been approved, so it's not even in use. So people may blame vaccines for problems that emerge afterwards, even if they are unrelated. So this is in regards to one of the reasons why it's so important that they get legal immunity from giving these vaccines out. Quote, "This could then lead to an increased number of litigation cases during which the safety and efficacy of the vaccine would be publicly questioned," it said in a statement to Reuters. That might lead to increased vaccine hesitancy and a slower recovery from the pandemic. It's quotes like that and statements like this that I'm about to read that really do make people question so many things. And they're right to question. It's okay to have questions, and it's okay to request certain answers before just diving in on certain decisions. So this coming again from Reuters. The vaccine maker's legal concern is rooted in the unprecedented speed of the effort to develop the COVID-19 shots, the EFPIA said. In normal circumstances, drug makers buy insurance to cover liability for vaccines, potential adverse effects. But COVID forced them to develop drugs so quickly that some side effects, for instance, a rare blood clotting condition in some of those who took the AstraZeneca vaccine, are emerging as the shots go into people's arms. So on the one hand, COVID vaccines are extremely safe, and on the other hand, there are these incidents that are happening, and these companies are afraid of being sued if they don't have legal immunity when they're giving out their vaccines to the refugees of the world. It's a pretty interesting take, and it's really not a good look. Had they been much more upfront about these issues, then I think people would have been a lot more, okay with the risks. But because they tried to hide them and then now they're coming out, it's becoming way more of an issue. Now for our last story, let's see what Australia has to say for what the best Christmas gift might be.
I would recommend that instead of Christmas shopping, everyone shops for a COVID booster online or reaches out and to their partner to make them an appointment to go online for a COVID shot. And that is the best, exciting gift that can be given.
It almost sounds like he's saying, look anywhere for a COVID booster online. Go to Amazon, go to Craigslist, wherever you can find one. Now that's kind of a weird, I don't know. That's Australia. It's just crazy to me how infatuated the world has become with vaccinations, and especially just coming out of the leadership in Australia. This is just crazy, The best possible Christmas gift you can get is a COVID vaccine, and get it any way you can. It's just not a healthy obsession. But moving on to actually cool news out of Australia, the discovery of a new millipede species was found recently. This coming from the BBC, a millipede with more legs than any known animal discovered in Australia. The pale-colored millipede has more than 1,300 legs and an elongated body about 95 millimeters long. The creature has been named Eumillipes persephone and was found almost 60 meters, 200 feet, underground in a mining region in Western Australia. The previous record holder was a California millipede species with 750 legs. Now here's a brief description. Like many subterranean animals, the millipede has no eyes and is colorless. Scientists suspect that it lives on fungi down there. An adult female in the study had 1,306 legs and another had 998. Two adult males had 818 legs and 778 legs. Millipedes first appeared more than 400 million years ago, and today there are around 13,000 species. Now here's a picture of this millipede. If you don't like millipedes, don't look for the next 5 seconds. And if you do, this thing is pretty freaking cool. And with that, we'll wrap our show up for today. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen. If you liked it, please share with your friends. Let's get more subscribers on the show. The more subscribers we get, the farther the signal goes, the more reasonable discussions that can be had. Alright guys, have a great weekend, and please enjoy this video.
Hey, this is Livy, Kyle's girlfriend.
What's up?
Kyle said he was with you, and I was just wondering if that was true.
Yeah, Kyle's always with me.
Oh, okay. Can I talk to him?
Yeah, here you go. What's up? My pussy. What's up? Hold on, I'll tell you later. Touch, bro.